and saying, please come in. All abilities, all shapes and sizes. What do you want to be part of? How do you want to be involved? What can we do for you?
By 2036, it's estimated there'll be 43,000 more people living here in Moreland. And they're all going to need to move about. To walk, cycle, drive, bus, tram, train, use shared vehicles, and whatever technology emerges next.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to viewers live streaming at home. My name is Councillor Lambros Tapinos, and I'm the Mayor of the City of Moreland and Chairperson for tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting is about planning and related matters. It is my pleasure to welcome you here to this meeting tonight. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on the lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, and I'd like to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways, and also pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any First Nations people that are with us today, and also acknowledge the considerable contribution of First Nations people to the life of our city. Members of the gallery, please note this is the Planning and Related Matters meeting, and it's being recorded and live streamed live on Council's website and Facebook. This recording will be available as video on demand, and gallery attendees are advised they will be recorded during this meeting. Councillors, just as a reminder that in line with the adopted Councillor Code of Conduct principles, and the councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in this meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interests of the local community, and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support the principles for leadership and good governance and secure public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption to tonight's meeting, please note that we have our council staff who may give you instructions around safety procedures. Please follow the directions of council staff and security officers if that eventuates, in the likely event that eventuates. We have councillors in attendance tonight. Councillor Natalie Aboud. Councillor Olivia Carly Hannon is on her way.
And Councillor Bolton's says 10 minutes too.
And Councillor Bolton's on her way. Councillor Helen Davidson, Councillor Jess Dorney, Councillor Alia Funley, Councillor John Kavanagh, Councillor Dale Martin, and our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Oscar Yildiz. We also have our officers in attendance. Group Manager City Development, Philip Priest, Unit Manager Urban Planning, Mark Hughes, Planning Coordinator, Lachlan McGowan, and Urban Planner, Michael Alexander. Councillors, do we have any apologies for tonight's meeting? I note that Councillor Riley is on leave of absence that's been approved by the Council. And we're waiting on two councillors who will join us shortly. If there's no further apologies, then I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is declaration of interest and/or conflict of interest matters. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? Councillor Davidson.
Yes, just on the last item for Hope Street, it's just an indirect personal relationship. So I'll leave the chamber at that time.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. When that item is before the council, I'll ask you to leave the chamber, and we'll make sure someone can let you know when that item is over so you can return. If there are no other conflict of interest, I would like to move on to the meeting. Item 4 is confirmation of the minutes. Councillors, can I please have a motion to accept the minutes of the council meeting of the Planning and Related Matters held on 25 September 2019. Councillor Davidson moved, and a second by Councillor Kavanagh. All those in favour? I declare that carried. Okay, we'll move on now to the main part of this meeting. And But before we do so, I'd like to give you an outline of how this planning and related matters meeting will run this evening. The relevant planner will introduce the report and the officer's recommendation. Then we will give any objector the opportunity to move to the lectern, which we have in front of us here, and make their submission. After this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to also speak. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name and address for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, would you please inform the meeting why you are opposed and suggest an alternative approach which will satisfy your concerns. Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. Please note there is a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as the chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce the time available to any speaker. Okay, we shall move on to presentation of reports. The first report we have this evening is DCF 86, 9S Wardens Walk, Coburg, and Part CP1 on PS 543333S. Thank you. Lachlan.
So this is an application at 9S Wardens Walk in Coburg. This is an application that's currently before VCAT. So the decision to be made tonight is to determine council's position in future VCAT hearing. Subject site is located in the Activity Centre Zone, Schedule 1. It's also covered by the Parking Overlay, Environmental Audit Overlay, and Development Contributions Plan Overlay. Subject site's in the Coburg Activity Centre, and this is an area where we expect to see significant housing growth. This site in particular has a preferred building height of 7 to 8 stories. This is the site and surrounds. As you can see, the subject site is currently vacant. It's also surrounded by existing buildings ranging in height from about 3 to 5 stories. The proposal is for 2 16-story towers, basement car parking, 339 apartments in total, 5% of which would be affordable housing. At the ground level, there's also a relatively small supermarket and retail space. Following slides are just a few images of the proposal. This will be the view from Kentridge Boulevard to the west of the site. Still on Kentridge Boulevard, a little bit closer again. You can see Wardens Walk along the right-hand side of the building there. This is the view of the subjects of the proposed building from Stockgate Avenue. And this one here shows what it would look like from Wardens Walk, looking generally in a northern direction. So the application was advertised, 41 objections were received. The main issues raised in the objections were the height, traffic, and overshadowing impacts. The key considerations, there's a few elements of proposals that are good. So the positives for this are the affordable housing contribution, and also there's a proposed setback from Wardens Walk, creating some space for a new footpath and some street tree planting. But overall, the proposed height is unacceptable, doesn't comply with the vision and development principles of the master plan. There's unresolved wind impacts, visual bulk, impact on the surrounding area is an issue. There's an inadequate ESD performance to support a building of this height, and similarly inadequate deep soil planting to support a building of this height. The recommendation is that council writes to VCAT, the objectors and all parties to the VCAT review, advising the council does not support the proposal for the reasons stated in the officer recommendation.
Thank you. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Olivia Carley-Hannon to the meeting as well. Okay, are there any objectors or submitters who would like to speak first? Yes, of course, sir. Please come up to the lectern.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity of speaking to you tonight. I'm Jeff Nicholson, and I live at 108 number 5 Wardens Walk. which is directly opposite the subject site. Meredith, my wife, is here with me this evening, and I were objectors, and we are owners and residents of our apartment. I'd like to raise three issues with you briefly this evening. Firstly, the Council's report. Secondly, what the proposed development means to us residents. And thirdly, the effect of Clause 7 of the planning scheme. Firstly, the report. Now, I note that I'm not meant to address the report in detail, so I'll limit myself to say that I note the recommendation of the Council is to advise VCAT that it does not support the proposal, and we agree with that position, and we also agree with the reasons that are set out at page 4 of the report. So I'll limit my comments to the report to that. Moving on to the effect that it has on residents, I'd like to mention three key objections, or there were in fact three key objections raised, they being height, traffic and overshadowing. I'll limit my discussion tonight to highlight height and overshadowing issues. So far as height's concerned, it's noted at page 14 of the report that there's a preferred height of 7 to 8 stories for this site. It's also noted that there are two 16-storey towers proposed, which is in fact double the proposed height. It's noted at page 14 of the report that to exceed the preferred height, you must meet certain criteria. Now, the criteria that is of most concern to us as residents is the criteria that the proposed development does not have an adverse effect on the amenity of adjoining properties. The adjoining properties being the 6 low-rise apartment buildings in Wardens Walk and Stockade Avenue. They form a horseshoe of sorts around the proposed sites, and you'd be aware of that and you would have seen it from the plans. I submit that the height of the proposed development is unsympathetic and out of character with that neighbourhood. I note at page 6 of the report, and this is very interesting, the tower facing us in Wardens Walk will be only 3 metres lower than the 19-storey tower that is under construction at the moment in Pentridge Boulevard. 3 metres lower than 19 storeys. Imagine looking out at this overbearing edifice every day. Clearly the height of the proposed development has an adverse impact on the amenity for us residents in Wardens Walk and Stockade Avenue. It's also noted at page 12 of the report that the Pentridge Village Master Plan vision includes the vision that residential development should be at a suitably intensive scale. So we have to look at what a suitably intensive scale is. And I submit that to determine what is in fact a suitably intensive scale, you must consider the effect that it has on residents. The proposed development is a gross overdevelopment with little or no regard to adjoining property owners and residents.
Begin to wind up, please. We're just over time.
Okay. Loss of daylight. In the report from the developer, it's stated that the properties to the west will be overshadowed until 10 and 11 a.m. daily. Some of the properties on Wardens Walk only have east-facing windows, and this will effectively mean that they lose all of their sunlight. This will have bearing on thermal warming, increased heating and lighting. Importantly, I wanted to mention Clause 7. As Lachlan said, this is before VCAT at the moment. There was a hearing in this matter last Thursday and we're awaiting a determination. One of the possible outcomes of that hearing is that objectors won't have the right to be heard at VCAT, and that's why it's very important that I have the opportunity to speak to you today fully, because I may not get the chance at VCAT. I may be deprived of that opportunity. And I'm going to have built next to me or opposite me a life-changing building which will not only affect me but my community. So this is why it's particularly important that councillors adopt your planner's recommendations to oppose the development. I'll be quick. In conclusion...
I'll give you another 10 seconds or 15
seconds. In
seconds.
conclusion, it's fair to say that residents expect some development, and in answer to your question, what would be appropriate is the current 7 to 8 16-storey building which has a permit. In closing, I say, if this development is allowed to proceed, you may as well say goodbye to the Pentridge Village Master Plan and expect open season on high-rises within the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. Just before we move on to the next objector, I'd like to welcome Councillor Sue Bolton to the meeting. Welcome, Sue. And also Councillor Oscar Yildiz has a conflict he would like to declare. Councillor, if you can please state the nature of the conflict.
Yeah, I've just had it confirmed by our governance officer. My brother and my sister, as well as a lot of family friends, live in Pentridge. Some of them living not too far. They live in Stockade Avenue. Brother and sister live a bit further away, but they are in Pentridge, and I think it's advised that I probably should declare a conflict.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, I'll ask you to leave the room and we'll call you back to the meeting when this matter has been dealt with. Okay, is there another objector that would like to go next? Yes, yes, please come to the lectern.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address the council. My name's Alan Rumble. I also am representing Peter Wright, one of my best mates. We both own units. We're in S8, which is on the corner of Stockade Avenue and Pentridge Boulevard. I own the north-east top on the highest story, the 5th story on the north-east, and Peter owns on the 5th story on the northwest. So we both on opposite sides on the 5th story. So if I could read from what I actually wrote originally, it'd be appreciated. We're lodging our objection to the construction of the proposed 16-story on the north-east intersection of Pentridge Boulevard and Stockade Avenue, which is adjacent to S8 apartment complex, currently 5-story. It should be noticed there is a difference, and that's already been clarified in terms of the stories. They've now said it was both 16 stories. Peter Wright is the owner of 401 located on the top floor of the northwest corner of S8, and I the owner of 403A located on the top floor of northeast corner of S8. From the outside, we would like to state we have no objection to the main proposal except the bulk and height of the 16-storey towers, one of which overshadows and dominates and dwarfs S8 apartments. I think it's good that there'll be a bit of a catalyst in terms of developing this site, but it's monumental. And if people can cast their eye or cast their mind back, if you come from up Bell Street, just before you come over the railway line, there's approximately a 10-storey building. Have a look at that. Add another 6 stories to that. 16 stories. Can you imagine? We believe a more appropriate tower size is 7 and 8 stories, which would be more in keeping with the overall low-rise precinct of Pentridge Village. Before I outline our objection to the above proposal, I believe it's important to restate the key performance things. But look, I won't go into all of that. I'll just say that from our perspective, I rent the unit, and there's nothing to say that over the long term, we might eventually live there. But the balconies are virtually half the width of the dwelling or the unit. And in Urbis' report, it states that the development which I'm in, which is S8, the overshadowing there is the worst of all the other complexes there. We have virtually overshadowed from 12 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon, which is the best time of the day. From 3 p.m. it starts to go down. But it's from our perspective, it's from here virtually another few feet from the objector, from that signage up there. And all I ask is that everyone has complied with the master plan. You have developed a master plan. We've all built in accordance with the master plan. The building, even at 16 stories, which is S13 down here, which is under your master plan, it talks about from the ground, from the natural ground. So it's not overbearing on anyone at all. It's facing over this way. the tennis courts, the oval.
Alan,
it
if you
has
can
no
begin to
impact
sum
on-
up, that
yeah.
would be great. We're over time.
It has no impact, but it complies with your master plan. So every building actually complies. You know, there's no doubt that the developers previously would have built higher if they were sort of allowed to. They've kept that. So if you can imagine walking out into your balcony and seeing 16 stories, we're 5 stories, 11 stories above that from here to that board across there. It's mammoth.
Okay.
And I ask you to take that into consideration. As a previous objector said, you might as well throw your master plan out the window. It'll be, if this gets up.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Alan. The next objector.
Good evening. My name's Andrew Hewitt. I live in one of the townhouses at townhouse number 6, 7 Wardens Walk. So I'm actually facing the new development. A couple of things I want to say. Firstly, I think the report that the council produced is pretty comprehensive and includes pretty much everything that we object to. However, it is tied partially to the planning regulations. For instance, in the overshadowing, my understanding is the planning regulations only require the plans to include September and March, which is when the sun is at its lowest on the horizon. However, I face east. In front of me, there's going to be a 60-metre long, 50-metre tall building between me and the sun. In their overshadowing diagrams, when the sun's at its lowest, it kind of sneaks around the corner for about 2 weeks, and that's what they show in their diagram. The reality is, for the other 9 months of the year or 10 months of the year, I will never see the sun. At 50 metres high, I will see the sun when it passes the top of the building until it gets vertical, which is probably somewhere around an hour and a half to 2 hours. The daylight in my townhouse will be severely limited. I think everybody else has covered most of the other topics. I just want to talk about the fact that if this goes through and it's allowed to be built, that you can basically ignore the master plan. I guarantee you every other developer will come in with building heights way in excess of the master plan because this will set the precedent. I also want to talk about what happened at VCAT. At VCAT, the council had a top lawyer attend on their behalf, and that was fantastic. But don't underestimate the builder. The builder put in a top QC. And as this goes forward, the amount of money the builder can make out of adding the extra stories is vast. They will spend as much money as they need by putting in top QCs to push their case. So I'd just like to thank the council for the report. I think they did a great job. I'm glad I'm not a planner. And just to get the council to ensure that they do everything they can to stop this, not just for Wardens Walk, but for the future of the whole master plan and the future of Cape Verde.
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt. Is there another objector? Yes, one at the back. Please come forward.
Thank you very much. I'm Helen Deems. I live in the Glencairn estate, which happens to be a little estate down in the southern area that has single dwelling covenants on every block of land, which is really quite delightful. No flats, no units. It's very area. But I am concerned about what's happening, particularly in this area because of Pentridge and because of the heritage aspects that have been lost, really. It's very unfortunate. So, as you know, we have asked time and time again for an analysis, a complete analysis of the impact that these developments are having on the entire area. As it stands, each development is taken in isolation effectively. It's not considered along with the impact that every other development's going to have. And we are very concerned about that. Particularly concerned about the fact that this is not just doubling what was originally planned, it's doubling and it's adding half again. It's just a massive development and it's not needed. It's actually not needed when you do an analysis of what could happen with housing. If they put 5 and 6 levels right throughout all of the transport corridors in Melbourne, they would cover comfortably for the accommodation that's needed. Anyway, we're really concerned about the fact that it's just dwarfing the area. You can see that with the photo that was shown at the start. And we're concerned about the traffic. If you go for a drive through that area now, as I did once when I was coming to a council meeting, it's wall-to-wall parking, and it's very difficult even to turn around and get out of that area. So it's already very busy. So no analysis of the amenity, of the impact on traffic, on sewerage, on all the other things that are needed. So heritage also, it's appalling. Anyway, thank you for supporting it. I know that you've been
Thank you for your submission.
unanimous virtually every time with every one of our applications.
Thank you, Helen. Is there another objector? No? Is there a representative of the applicant? No? Okay. Councillors, is there any questions firstly? Okay. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Councillor O'Farnley.
Just for clarity, can the council officers just outline the next steps after the resolution? Because as I understand it, one of the residents said that they cannot object to VCAT, and I'm just not clear on what that actually is. So we're making a submission tonight to VCAT. When do the residents get to have their say at VCAT?
So, thank you for the question. So on the Thursday last week, there was a practice day to consider a preliminary issue. That issue was to determine whether or not there are third-party appeal rights for this proposal. We haven't received a decision back from that day yet. We don't know when that's going to come. That could come tomorrow or it could come in 2 weeks' time. So depending on the outcome of that, the objectors may or may not have a right to attend future VCAT hearings. In terms of what future VCAT hearings there are, there's a compulsory conference, which is like a mediation process scheduled for early next year. Then a few months after that, there is also a hearing of the merits of the application. So if the objectors are parties, determined to be parties, they're welcome to attend both of those hearings. If the decision is that they are not parties and there's no third-party appeal rights, then they may not attend.
But just to clarify, council will be a party at VCAT. Yeah.
Correct.
Councillor Abood.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll try and stand up.
Don't
So hard. Lockie, what's your personal opinion? Do you think that they are likely to be allowed to object, or is it because the master plan came from the Planning Minister's office that they won't be? Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, Lachlan, and just questions should just come through the Mayor, please.
Yeah, I think it's probably best way to respond to that question is the council's position at that preliminary hearing, and the position put by our lawyers was that the third-party appeal rights should apply, and that the proposal wasn't in accordance with the master plan.
Okay, so we've argued that they should be able to.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping to hear.
Great. Councillor Kavanagh.
I'd like to move the officer recommendation, please, and if I have a seconder, I'd like.
Is there a seconder?
Councillor Bolton, can take
I heard Councillor Bolton's voice first. Councillor Bolton. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you very much. Firstly, can I congratulate the objectors on the way they presented their case tonight, and I sincerely hope you get an opportunity to do that at VCAT too. Just one point I do want to make is a couple of times it was mentioned that it's not in keeping with our master plan. Unfortunately, on the Pentridge site in 2009, Justin Madden took control of the site at that point, and it's his master plan that's been handed back to council. And I really want to make that point because I was on council even at that time, and we were working constructively with the developers, the owners of the site at that time. And I think council, given time, would have come up with a far improved master plan to what we were given back. In my opinion, we were handed back a master plan that was excessive in its development. And even though that master plan, in my view, is excessive in its development, still not happy with that. We see an application like tonight where they want to go even further above what I thought was an excessive master plan. And the only reason why there's a debate as to whether there's third-party appeal rights is because we're arguing that they have exceeded the master plan that was given to us by a minister at the time, which I'm personally totally opposed to ministerial interventions, even if they happen to be in favour of council's position, because I don't believe one person should have that control, whether they be a minister of the Crown or not. I believe that local decisions should generally be made by local councils and local communities. That's my view. So this master plan, even in my, as I mentioned, I believe it's excessive, but even beyond that, there are supposed to be allowing for a 10 and a 16-storey so-called, what's the term that's used? I'm trying to think, like as in like a show building. This is not. This is in a site that's supposed to be 8 stories. Many would argue that 8 stories is excessive, but no, a 16-storey development, and as the gentleman put out so well, in fact, only 3 metres shorter than the 20-storey developments approved. So this is excessive in the extreme, and I hope fellow councillors will support the officers, and I appreciate the work that's gone into the officer report and by refusing this application and by going to VCAT as strongly as we can to oppose it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bolton?
Well, my view is that, probably an 8-storey building would be too high for this location, but what's being proposed is far, far, far worse than that. We know that 8 stories is allowed under the master plan, but this is, in my opinion, total overreach by the developer and a money grab. Potentially it could be an ambit claim in the hope that maybe VCAT might, give something in the middle between 8 stories and 16 stories, which I also think that would be problematic as well. I think this building needs to be reduced to 8 stories. I gather some residents who only relatively recently bought into one of the surrounding units facing this development did inquire when they moved in as to what scale developments were going to be in the area, and understood there was an application for 8 stories, which they decided, well, it wouldn't be great, would be livable with, but this is just absolutely excessive. I do agree with the comments. If this does get through VCAT, then this will be the absolute future of Coburg and future of Pentridge at stake, because there will absolutely, we could expect, possibly even applications for 30-storey or 20-storey buildings in the Pentridge area. This threat by the developer to remove third-party appeal rights or knock back the right of appeal by residents, the right of residents to speak in VCAT, isn't just in relation to the master plan, it's also in relation to the activity centre zone, which was the C123 planning amendment that council voted on in the last council. So it's both state government and council that has really allowed this, and but I do support the comments in the report which argue that third-party appeal rights can be retained, should be retained. The argumentation around that in this report, and certainly it is good to see that council officers have argued that vigorously, that the third-party appeal rights be retained. I always opposed that element to the C123 planning amendment that went through council last time. I mean, there are other elements of this. There's the sunlight issue, which has been raised by the residents. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like in the darkest period of winter to only get an hour and a half of sunlight. But also there's an element of wind, which has been pointed out in the planner's report, but also the the fact that all of the surrounding, this is like a horseshoe of apartments surrounding these two 16-storey buildings, and all of those those apartment blocks, all just 3 and 4 stories. So that is not compatible with two 16-storey buildings going in that location.
Councillor, just begin to wind up. Thank you. Is there a speaker against the motion? There being none, I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried unanimously. Okay, we'll now pass on to council officers to detail the next steps.
Thank you. Council will now write to VCAT and all parties to the appeal, advising of council's position, which is that we can support the application based on the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. If someone can let the Deputy Mayor back in, that's great. The next item on the agenda this evening is DCF 87, 81 and 81A Lygon Street, Brunswick East. Yes, I throw to council officers. Is it Michael?
Good evening, councillors and members of the gallery. I'm here tonight to present on 81A and 81 Lygon Street in Brunswick East. So this is an application for the sale and consumption of liquor, and it's an on-premises licence for partial demolition of the heritage building and construction of a single-storey extension to the rear of that building and a complete reduction to the car parking requirements. In terms of the planning controls, this site is included in the Commercial 1 zone and it's affected by a number of different overlays. That includes the Design and Development Overlay, Schedule 19, the Development Contributions Plan Overlay, the Heritage Overlay and the Parking Overlay. This site is located within the Lygon Street corridor of the Brunswick Activity Centre, and as such it's an area nominated for significant change. Under the DDO 19, the preferred building height for this site is 3 to 9 stories. In terms of the site and surrounds, the subject site is currently developed by an Edwardian era bank. All sites adjoining the property are included within the Commercial 1 zone, with the nearest residentially zoned land approximately 16 metres to the west of the subject site. And the photo just to the right is just an image of the subject site in the streetscape, showing the variability of heights, but also uses. So we've got commercial development, but also some recent residential infill. Specifically, the application is for the sale and consumption of liquor on premises, and this includes a maximum capacity of 300 patrons, a total of 27 staff. The hours of operation for this venue is 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. For the external dining areas, and that's every day. 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. for the internal trading areas, Sunday to Wednesday. And then later hours, so 7 a.m. till 1 a.m. the following day for internal trading areas on Thursday to Saturday. It also includes the partial demolition of the existing building. This is confined really to the facade at the ground floor and some non-contributory elements at either elevation. Also a single-storey extension that will accommodate a dining pavilion at the rear and the reduction of the car parking to 0. So this is an image of the proposed ground floor plan. So as you can see, there's a large amount of area accommodating dining and seating areas, both internally and externally along the north perimeter of the site. It also contains the kitchen and other storage areas, as well as 2 bar spaces. The first floor is really dedicated to a function space. This will accommodate a maximum number of 69 people. It'll have a separate bar to accommodate small functions, as well as the office for the venue itself. This particular level will also accommodate some live and amplified music. When the application went to public notice, we received 19 objections. In summary, those objections raised a number of issues. This includes adverse noise impacts, the negative cumulative impact, car parking, hours of operation, the overall maximum number of patrons, waste management and antisocial behaviour. And that meeting was held on the 2nd of October of this year. Following the meeting, the applicant offered to make a number of changes to resolve some of the issues that were raised. This includes removing all the speakers from the open outdoor areas to deal with noise issues, to change the fireplace, which was originally wood, to LPG or ethanol, and that was to deal with smoke issues. Also to remove the smoking area adjacent to the pergola, and for any functions that were booked at the first floor that had a DJ or any amplified music, they required security. Given the size of the site and the venue, the patron capacity is considered acceptable. The hours of operation, given its activity centre context, is also considered appropriate. The development is appropriate in relation to height and appearance. The cumulative impact is one considered to be positive, contributing to the diversity of licensed premises within the area. The car parking reduction to 0 is appropriate given the site's excellent public transport access. There are a couple of issues with the application that can be resolved via conditions. This relates to noise attenuation, the heritage response, and the ESD outcomes. It is the Officer recommendation that a notice of decision to grant a planning permit be issued, subject to conditions. Some of the key conditions include noise and acoustic requirements. So this is that no music should be played in any external or outdoor areas. That additional acoustic treatment should be undertaken and a report prepared within 3 months of the new use commencing. That material changes at ground floor facade be modified to improve the site's response to its heritage context, and to achieve best practice ESD outcomes through the submission of a sustainable design assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Is there an objector that would like to go first? Nick Dolby.
Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick. Luscombe Street round the corner, first place my family lived in Brunswick. My mother still lives nearby. 300 patrons, but that's for both, that's the licensed capacity for both internal and external. So that'll be until 11 p.m. Afterwards, the number of patrons will be markedly reduced. I wonder by how much. The other issue is the heritage changes. We didn't get to see any details of heritage changes. Do we have any details?
Okay.
That's all I've got.
Thank you. We can get some answers to that. Philip or Michael?
Yes.
Certainly, in terms of the patron numbers, Nick, through the chair, the conditions in the recommendation in the report tonight talk about after 10 p.m. the numbers would reduce to 250 from the 300. In terms of the facade changes, do we?
Yeah, so I've got the demolition elevation just on this slide here. So the key issue was about was really just confined to this space here. So not the demolition itself, but what was being put in place. I'll just note that the existing ground floor facade is non-contributory and it's heavily modified. So that's not an issue from council's perspective. I'll move along to the proposed elevation. Here we are. So it's not changing dramatically. The key issue was advice from our heritage advisor, which was a concern about the use of a blue tile at the store here. It was considered to be indicative more of like a pub rather than the site and the building's former use as a bank. So in its place, what we'll do is remove the blue tiles as a permit condition and put in place some render.
Okay, thank you. Is there another objector that would like to go next? Yes, please come to the lectern.
Hi, my name is Anne Scanlon. I live at 118 Western Street, which is directly behind this. It was sort of noted in there. So I know this is a very large drinking establishment. It's a pub, or it's a bar, and although patrons will be offered food, they're not obliged to eat. Drinking crowds tend to become quite noisy, and there is a potential for a large number of drinkers to be in the outdoor space at any time, which it does create quite a bit of noise. In the measures that have been proposed by the applicant, which would limit this adverse amenity impact, is that they're locating the primary outdoor dining area at the centre and the east side towards Lygon Street and site along the interface with the office building to the north. But there's also a pergola area at the back, which directly abuts one of our buildings, and there's openable windows along there. That pergola area has a retractable roof, which is open most of the time and is only meant to be closed after 10 p.m. So that means that whole area is actually open and will create noise. Another issue is that a lot of the noise attenuation measures, so that things are sort of closing down a bit after 10 p.m. But this venue is operating from 7 a.m. We live there 7 days a week, all of that time, and there will be quite a considerable amount of noise coming before 10 p.m. So I think any measures that can be made to decrease that outdoor noise are really important to look at. Some of with the patron acoustic report, they've stated that the daytime patron noise is fine, but it's expected that the nighttime targets are actually going to be exceeded for patron noise. And I don't think that's necessarily acceptable. It's not by much, but I think that it should be important that the patron noise doesn't exceed the acceptable limits. And there's been no acoustic report that actually looks at the impact of our building, which is actually directly at the back of that, and also our backyard, our open living space is directly behind there as well. And that space behind is also part of our living space, and we will be adversely affected noise-wise by that. So our main issue really is with the pergola area, which is open at most time. It directly abuts onto our living space, and it's directly below some openable windows along the back of that space. I think a solution would be that pergola area has a permanent roof that is built of the same sort of material as the dining pavilion, that is there all the time, so then at least that would decrease some of the total external area and therefore perhaps limit those exceeding targets. So that's one thing. Now, I just want to check that all of the external speakers have been removed from the plan. I know that there was 5. I'm hoping that they're all, including the pergola. So why a retractable roof on the pergola is one of my questions. And another thing in the acoustic report is that they say, I should have brought my glasses, that any gaps between the retractable roof when closed and the boundary walls to the north and west subject should be sealed by providing material, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just wondering whether those plywood seals are actually going to be attached to the walls of our building. It seems that the buildings that are being proposed, the dining pavilion and the pergola, don't actually have their own walls. It seems that they're actually using
and please begin to wind up because we are over time.
So that's the main thing. So just and I just want to check that smoking area has definitely been moved to the front after 10 p.m. And so just in conclusion, basically I want to say that we live there all the time. I think mitigating that noise from the outdoor dining area and the pergola is really important to make our lives livable.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Okay, is there another objector? Yes, please come to the lectern.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Julian Maycock. I've been living in Barclay Street for about 20 odd years and have really loved the area and hoping I will continue to love the area. Basically, look, the primary purpose of the council is to ensure the well-being of its residents, and the scale of this drinking venue which is adding to the disproportionate number of licensed venues. Therefore, the cumulative social impact is at complete odds with the primary responsibility of council. Basically, I'm asking the council to reduce the harm that drinking establishments can have on the community by reducing the capacity of the establishment. I'm not against the development, but it will simply also erode the sense of place of the Lygon Street local area. It is meant to be, according to your council, providing areas with high levels of activity to provide strong character and local sense of place. This sense of place will be eroded if establishments such as this continue to come into the area. Also, I have I don't trust reducing the capacity from 300 to 250 after 10 o'clock PM. I haven't been in an establishment in my life when I've been asked to leave an establishment if I'm behaving, and I've actually never been thrown out of an establishment for not behaving, so I'd just like to clarify that. So I'm not too sure how this will work. And finally, I know you've waived the car parking requirements and you believe that the car parking will have no impact on the surrounding areas, but I'd like to invite you all to come to Barclay Street on a Saturday night and have a look and compare it to during the day and maybe other nights, and you will see that these facilities, these function areas definitely impact car parking. It would be lovely if they didn't. We'd love everyone to get public transport, but it's a nightmare. But thank you very much for listening to my application and my objection, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Is there another objector that would like to go next? Yes, please come to the lectern.
Good evening. Hermes Damianos. I live at 118 Western Street, Brunswick, partner to Anne Scanlon. So I support all her issues that she raised. For me, mainly the concern is I grew up in the area since the early 60s. I know the area intimately, how noise travels and impacts the area. We've been affected by other venues in the area severely. We've made complaints to the council, police, the VCGLR. I'm wondering who's going to police the noise issues that we are directly impacted on. Our building, as Anne said, directly abuts the proposal. Again, as Julian said, we're not against the proposal, but it just needs to be reined in and made reasonable. We tolerate a lot of things in the area, a lot of noise and associated issues. And I appreciate the amendments that have been made, but again, just who's going to monitor them? We had an issue with the Quarry Hotel across the road. I went to the doorstep asking them to turn their music down because they were playing live music, and the manager was yelling at me from this distance, telling me that they're within their decibel range. So it's all subjective. You might have decibel meters monitoring things, but when you complain to the authorities on the night or the next day, the next following weekday, there's no evidence to support, to understand the subjectivity, the impact that resonates within our property. It's caused us a lot of stress over the years, to a point where we had to vacate our property for a while until an issue was resolved through council. We're grateful for that resolution. So we wish them well, but again, how do we monitor the impact that it has directly upon us?
Okay, thank you. Is there another objector? No? Is there a representative from the applicant? Yes, please come forward.
Thank you, Mayor. We're the joint applicants. We won't take 3 minutes each. We'll try and do about a minute and a half each. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My name is Gavin Van Staden. As I said, I'm one of the joint applicants. Melanie here on my left is the better half of a business relationship. She'll have a few words after me. My hospitality experience is fairly broad. I've worked in two fine dining, cocktail bars, restaurants for the past 20 years in Melbourne. But my last position was managing one of Melbourne's best known restaurants, which is Red Spice Road, where I was the licensee and managing director for nearly 10 years. I've travelled past this site every day to and from work for the past 8 years, and during this time it's always struck me that it's such a shame that an iconic building with so much history has been sitting vacant more often than it's been occupied. This building was a significant landmark in the streetscape for most of the 20th century. Since then, since the State Savings Bank sold all their properties in 1990, it sort of hasn't had a purpose. Since the sale of that building, the area has seen a lot of changes, make no mistake. There's been a great mix of cultures and incomes that have resulted in a vibrant community that a lot of us in this room call our home. And we hope will continue to create a diverse society for many years to come. Melanie and I have carefully considered the local area and amenity in preparing this application. Our patron and venue management plan was developed from our experience as well-regarded operators, and not to mention our experience as inner-city residents. We understand noise, we understand amenity. We spent a lot of time researching architects who could transform this building into a functional and beautiful space, and also treat it with the respect that it deserves from a heritage perspective. That architect is Ewart Leaf, who continued to win awards for the hospitality venues in Melbourne. We've also employed numerous consultants to advise us on the impact of our application to the surrounding neighbourhood. Everything you see in front of you tonight has been carefully considered well before the application was being lodged. The design itself has been a result of this advice, and it has produced a venue that we'll be proud to name Teller, a firm nod to the building's banking roots. Councillors, Mayor, when you make your decision tonight, I urge you to please consider the level of detail and considerable resources we've utilised in bringing this thoughtful and creative application to Council. This extra mile has been taken without any prompt or demand, but only to ensure that we've considered everything. I feel I speak for both of us when I say the result is a positive and iconic venue for us all to be proud of.
Thank you, Gavin. Melanie?
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. So for the past 15 years, I've been the owner-operator of the Metropolitan Hotel in the city. Sadly, the Metropolitan days are numbered as there was future development happening there. So I've known this for some time, and I've spent many months over the past years or so searching for my next venture. So when Gavin introduced me to that beautiful old building with the generous tree out the front, I knew he'd stumbled upon something exceptional. I've spent the past 20 years operating venues in the CBD and suburbs. My parents owned and operated many successful hospitality businesses in the country. So I grew up in hospitality. This is what I know, this is what I do, and this is what I love. I feel Teller will have much in common with these country operations in the way that a neighbourhood venue serves many purposes to many people. Teller will be a quiet spot for a morning coffee. It's a space for families to have dinners, celebrations. It's a place for milestones, catching up with friends, connecting with colleagues, and hosting community groups. It's where you can spend many sunny summer afternoons or winter evenings. No matter what the occasion is, we really are wanting to do an extension of people's lounge rooms. That's really what we're wanting for the area. Part of our larger plan is to increase our ties to the residents of Brunswick East, to lend the upstairs function space to local community groups through the week. We aim to be a venue that does help and does think about what we can do, not just for our immediate neighbours, but for the environment and for our economy. We have carefully considered our design and our philosophy. We sat with those who are concerned about this application, and we have liaised with Moreland Planning to address many of those concerns. Gavin and I are not some large hospitality group, so we don't have an unlimited fund pool of investor pool here. We're self-funded, we're small business, we're committed to bringing a family-friendly venue that is fit for purpose for the residents in the area. We're hands-on operators. So I'd just like to say thank you for considering our application.
Thank you, Melanie.
And happy to
Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Bolton, and just through the Mayor, Councillor.
Well, two questions. One was about the question from the resident earlier and about the pergola, and I gather that there's been some concessions made by the applicant about the pergola, but just wondering if you could sort of respond about the pergola and that proposal to have the roof closed altogether. Secondly, I couldn't see anything in the planning conditions or in the council officer's report about a question of a loading bay. For obviously there'll be, you know, very heavy goods to be transported into the venue, and so what's the arrangement for delivery drivers and so forth there?
Okay. Look, I'll direct that to the applicants, but if you can be very quick with your answers, that would be great.
Sure. So just on the subject of pergola, obviously that has been designed to be acoustically treated as per the recommendations by our acoustic officer. There is a condition that an acoustic report will be prepared after 3 months to ensure that our calculations are correct. If they're not, then we will need to fix the pergola. So I feel that it's an insurance policy for the objectors that in 3 months' time, what we say we're going to build is going to be built. As far as the loading bay is concerned, it's not something that we've directly addressed, but I've been on Lycon Street. There are loading bays along there. We aim to be as sustainable as possible and to use suppliers that we don't get daily deliveries, and so that'll be part of our ESD and our SDA or whatever it may be. We can address those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillors? Councillor Davidson.
Oh, if there's no further questions,
I've got a question.
I've got a question?
Yeah.
Councillor Dorney.
Thank you. Thanks for presenting and for your well-considered application. I am just speaking, we've heard from the residents tonight about concerns around excess patron numbers. I do know that it has been assessed and 300 fits within the limit. You've since done some further work to drop that to 250 after 10 p.m. While I know the residents and myself as a councillor are appreciative to the conditions that you have made since the information, P is for right now, information discussion. I'm wondering if you would be, what your thoughts are around how you came to the 250 and whether, given what the residents have spoken to tonight around that cumulative impact and social impact and your commitment to the residents of the area as well, whether you'd be considering maybe looking at 250 for the entirety of while Talla is open.
Thank you for the question. We've done part of the feasibility study was to look at the numbers and what was potentially viable. Obviously, we looked at other venues on the street, comparable in size and the numbers. I won't take too much of your time and keep it quite short. Am I of the understanding that you're saying 250 at all times?
Yeah.
It's something that we would consider.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, councillors? No. Okay, is there someone who would like to propose a motion? Councillor Davidson.
Shall we sit down?
Please. Thank you.
I'd like to propose the officer's recommendation in the report, and if I have a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Is there a seconder? Councillor O'Farnley? Councillor Davidson.
I'd like to thank the objectors who attended tonight and also the applicants for their thoughtful and well-considered position. I think that given the nearest residential zone is more than 16 metres away, and the various amendments that have been made, and also the concessions made during the planning information discussion, I believe that this is a well thought out proposal for an activity centre that is thriving I appreciate the vision that you've described, and also I'm satisfied that in addition to the location being in the activity centre, 16 metres away from the nearest residential zone, the applicant's concessions in removing the speakers from the outside area and increasing the security for particular occasions. I think that this presents a strong vision for a spot that can have a very thriving, well-connected community, and also, given Moreland's position of supporting local business, that's something that I really strongly hope councillors also endorse.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor.
Thank you. I'm also supportive of the council officer's recommendation tonight, and for me, this venue is in the right location. It's not in a residential area, it's in an activity centre, right where we want these type of hospitality venues to be located. So I think it's situated perfectly. The council officer opened this report saying, the permanent applicant could go for a up to a 9-storey building here. We're talking about a small hospitality venue, which for me is a big win for Moreland. Now, a lot of the issues that the residents have raised during the planning information discussion period have been addressed through the council officer's report, which I'm supportive of, which is obviously addressing the noise issues, the heritage issues, and the ESD issues. Beyond that, I'm really impressed with the applicants that have actually shown up tonight. Not very often do we actually have the actual applicant of these type of venues show up and actually front up and speak and address these issues that the community have raised and front up to it. So for me, it bodes really well in terms of they're really taking ownership of this venue moving forward, and will work with the community when it comes to noise complaints, etc. I'm not supportive of reducing patron numbers from 300 to 250. We need to make sure that when we have quality applicants like this come into Moreland that are looking to invest their own money and create a vibrant community, that they have a sustainable business that can operate. And past 10 p.m, that venue significantly shrinks, which for me addresses a lot of the noise issues, which is what we're trying to address by reducing patron numbers anyway. So that has been addressed for me moving forward. I'm happy with the council officer's report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dorney.
Yeah, I'd like to propose some amendments, and if I've got a...
We'll just wait, Councillor, until they're on the screen. That's it. Okay, is there a seconder?
Can you see if they're amenable first?
Oh, of course. Are they acceptable to the mover?
No.
No, and I assume not with the seconder either. So is there a seconder to the proposed amendments from Councillor Dorney? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Abood. Councillor Dorney.
So I'm also really supportive of this application and supportive of local business in the area. I think that this will be a real asset and add a really nice mix. As someone who often frequents that area, having a bit more diversity in terms of what is available would be a good thing. That said, I have some amendments that just look at in taking on balance everything that I've heard from residents. I've had lots of conversations, hearing you both speak tonight, looking at seeing if councillors were amenable to reducing the numbers by 50 people throughout while the venue is open. And if not, then I'd actually like to vote on things separately as well, if possible. But the others are around installing some extra additional bike hoops out on the front street. I was keen on the idea of adding a bit more. I can't remember how many. I know it's more than the acceptable limit, but for the patron numbers, I would have liked to see a few more than, I think it's 5 or 6 or 7. There's a few. Anyway, it's still it's over what was planning scheme requires, but I appreciated that there was no space within the venue. It would have required significant cutting into tables and other spaces and such. So I decided looking at the street was a reasonable thing. And the other one is just a slight one around, it's not in the planning scheme amendment, but looking at one of the toilets as a gender neutral toilet. It could be the accessible toilet, and it's just around the stage. I think that's, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Abood.
I think the fact that the application has some really groundbreaking goals, including the way that you're disposing of your waste with the Orca system, the fact that you've provided secure bike parking for your staff with an effort to to encourage people to use different modes of transport, which is part of our goals in the council plan as well. And the fact that you've just said that you're amenable to dropping the patronage by 50 patrons shows that these conditions are not too outrageous, and should be accepted by the other councillors, although I do get the vibe that they will be. But I think also the fact that it's Brunswick means having a gender neutral toilet is something that is a very Brunswick thing to do. As a Moreland City Councillor, I've observed in my time on the council that there are people who live in the community who really become overwhelmed by the fact that they've been assigned specific genders and can't go to places even just basically to a toilet because of the implications of that for those people on a personal level. And I think that for the people that do need to know that they're a man or a woman, those toilets will still be notified. So I hope that councillors will be supportive of these very minor amendments. And I look forward to this venue happening in the city because it's restoring an old heritage building. It's fulfilling some dreams, and I've been there, I understand what it's like to be an owner-operator. And I do believe that the patronage exists in the city to be able to support a business like this. And, people in Moreland love to go out, and they love to go out with their friends and with their families. So I'm supportive of the amendments and the application.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Is there any opposition to the amendment? Anyone who'd like to speak against? Okay.
Can I just ask a question about the gender neutral toilet?
Councillor Kavanagh, yes.
Are you asking if a person identifies as a male, are they able to use that toilet? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
anyone can use the toilet.
use the
I thought so. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Family.
Look, I rise to speak against the amendments in regards to the reduction of patron numbers. I've already outlined my position to that a little earlier. I don't see what the net benefit there is other than putting the sustainability of a business at risk. Yes, they'd consider it, but that doesn't mean they'd happily endorse it. Secondly, regarding the gender neutral toilets, I think that should be something that we consider at a council level for all planning applications rather than isolating particular planning applications that come through. Let's have an actual strategy on that and then adopt that. I know we have a strategy on a whole range of things like human rights, but what is the planning considerations that we want to put in there and what do we want to enforce rather than picking and choosing which application we want to go with moving forward. So I'm against the amendments as put.
Thank you, councillor. Are there any other speakers on the amendment? No? Okay, then we'll put the amendment to the vote. All those in favour?
Are you doing the whole lot?
Can we separate them?
I am happy to split the patron numbers, and then I think the rest could be taken together.
I'm a bit concerned that the bike hoops will be lost because of the fact of the gender neutral toilet.
If I have a request, if I'm hearing to put them all separately, albeit that will take longer, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you,
I think it might be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Condition 1, which is about the additional bicycle hoops. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Condition 3.
I'm sorry. I was thinking we were doing condition 11. I'm sorry. I'm in favour of that.
That's carried. I won't put it to the vote again.
Yeah, sorry. I thought we were doing
Condition 20 or condition... Which one are you going through?
The first one.
He said one, but he means 2-0.
not change conditions.
Or 4 bicycle hoops.
So condition 20.
Sorry?
It's condition 20.
On the screen.
Okay, it is both condition 1 and condition 20.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, are people happy with that?
Yes.
Would people like me to put that to the vote?
No.
Okay, great. All right, then condition 3, which is about patron numbers.
So that also affects condition 11, doesn't it?
And that affects condition 11 as well. All right. So all those in favour? All those against? I declare that lost.
Are you abstaining?
Well, all those in favour, all those against would be me. I declare that lost.
Just because I'm interested to know what you're voting.
Condition 21, to have at least one toilet to be signed as gender neutral. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that 1.
Sorry, could I please have a division on that?
So condition 21, all those in favour? All those against? No, declare that carried. Condition 22, to include a sign reminding patrons leaving the venue. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Okay, thank you, councillors. Now that we've dealt with the amendments, we can put the substantive motion, where we can continue to debate the substantive motion. Is there any other speakers on the substantive as amended? There being none, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Michael, could you please outline the next steps? Thank you.
Council is determined to issue a notice of a decision to grant a planning permit subject to conditions contained in the alternative recommendation. That includes condition 20, condition 1M, condition 21 and condition 22. Following the issue of the notice of a decision, all objectors will get a copy of that notice of a decision and have 28 days to make an appeal with VCAT. If no appeal is lodged with VCAT, that NOD will become a planning permit. At that point, the permit applicant will have 60 days to lodge a review application with VCAT to contest any conditions of the planning permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. We shall now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is DCF 88, 200-216 Sydney Road, Coburg. Yes. We'll just wait a few minutes whilst Councillor Davidson leaves the room. Thank you, Councillor. Lachlan, over to you when you're ready.
Thank you. So this is an application at 200-216 Sydney Road in Coburg. This is an application to amend an existing permit, and I'll take you through the history of that shortly. Subject site is located in the activity centre zone. In the main part, very rear of the site, which fronts Cash Street, is in the general residential zone. The site's also covered by the parking overlay, the environmental audit overlay, and the development contributions plan overlay. Subject site's in the Coburg Activity Centre, where we expect to see significant housing growth. Preferred building height for this site is 18 metres. An aerial photograph of the subject site. Subject site was formerly a plumbing supplies warehouse. It's recently been cleared of most of the buildings. At the very front of the site, there's an existing sales office / display suite for the approved development. So a bit about the history. The existing approval is for an 8-storey mixed-use building, which contains 155 apartments and ground-level commercial spaces. It's also 12 townhouses located towards the rear of the site in that general residential zone land. The permit was issued following successful mediation at VCAT and supported by Council at the November 2018 PAR meeting. Through the VCAT process, significant concessions were made by the permit applicant. These included the creation of a pocket park on Cash Street and increased setbacks from the adjoining residential properties on Rennie Street. A few images here just to show some of those changes that were achieved through the VCAT process. This one here is a bit of a before and after, showing some of those increased setbacks from residential properties fronting Rennie Street. And this is the rear at Cash Street, where one of the townhouses was deleted and replaced with what will be a publicly accessible pocket park. So the current proposal is for an amendment to the existing permit to add 3 additional apartments and also to increase the size of a rooftop communal open space area. The 3 additional apartments are at the top level at the Sydney Road end of the site, covered by those 2 red boxes on the left of the image there. And the box on the right shows the location of the rooftop communal open space. From directly in front of the site on Sydney Road, the sightline diagrams show that you won't actually be able to see those top level apartments, the 3 additional ones. Where you will see them from is further north and south along Sydney Road. These images here show those views. So if we start in the left-hand side of the image, that shows the existing proposal, the existing approval at the top left, and at the bottom left, the proposed proposal. And then on the right-hand side, that would be a view from south of the subject site, looking up towards the site. The top image again is the existing approval. The bottom image shows the proposed changes. So the application was advertised, 10 objections were received. The main issues raised were overlooking and noise from the expanded rooftop communal open space, which was contrary to a previous agreement made at VCAT between the applicant and all other parties. Following notice of the application, the permit applicant agreed to return the size of the rooftop communal space back to what was previously agreed to at VCAT. So the key considerations are really that the 3 additional apartments will have negligible impact on the amenity of surrounding residential properties being located at the Sydney Road end of the site. The additional visual bulk impact to Sydney Road is considered to be acceptable. There's also noted that the application for the 3 apartments was an anticipated outcome of the previous VCAT process, where the applicant made a number of concessions. The number of apartments approved was reduced through that process through things like the pocket park and the increased setbacks from neighbouring properties. The recommendation is to issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit. The key conditions, and there's one only really, and that is that the rooftop terrace be reduced in size to match the previous approval.
Thank you. Is there an objector that would wish to go first? Yes, come forward to the lectern.
Hello, my name's Polly Bastow. I live at 1 Cash Street, which is the property that's very close to the development. I'm really pleased that the rooftop terrace has been reduced in size to match the previously approved plans, because as part of the advertising, they're talking about a rooftop cinema. So essentially that rooftop garden would be about 36 metres away from my bedroom window, so that wouldn't have been a particularly good outcome. As Lachlan mentioned, there was VCAT discussions about pros and cons, and I spoke previously to you about how it was the best of a pretty scary development, but we tried to get something out of it, and the pocket park for everyone in the area is a good solution. But while I've got you here, I'd just like to say that we're having a lot of trouble with the site in that it's got no site security, and because we back onto it, anyone can walk through that site at any time and look into the back of into our house. People are dumping rubbish in there. There's graffiti. There's cats are going crazy in there. and there's nothing we can do about it. So even if it's not for this application, but in future, the council should really do something about ensuring that site security is maintained at all times, because, you know, it gets to the point where you don't want to leave your house because anyone can wander in at any time. Probably shouldn't be saying that publicly. But yeah, so if the council would do something about insisting on site security, I sent you an email
Yes.
as showing that there's just, you can wander in any time.
Polly, I'm happy to register that with our customer service staff tomorrow morning,
Yep.
and our local laws officers will be out to look at that. Can we just get back to the application for
Yep.
tonight, if possible?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, as long as that rooftop area stays where it was, where we negotiated at VCAT, there's little more I can say.
Okay, thanks very much. Is there another objector? No, a representative from the applicant? Yes, please come forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors. We don't have a lot to say. We support the officers' recommendation and thank the officers for their assistance throughout this amendment application, but also the original application, which went through a VCAT process and a successful mediation, as Lachlan said. As Lachlan also said, the proposal has been sort of amended, if you like, via a condition, albeit the rooftop terrace and the expansion to it no longer forms part of this proposal. And the proposal is essentially limited to the addition of the 3 apartments, which at the top level fronting Sydney Road. As Lachlan's identified, the assessment of the application is really about an assessment of the visual impacts. As the sightline showed, you won't see it from directly in front. It will be visible in some oblique views in the approach from the north and south on Sydney Road. But realistically, we would expect that those views would be built out over time as the centre develops in accordance with the objectives of the activity centre zone. In terms of the other impacts, there will be no additional overshadowing caused by the additional apartments, and there's no unreasonable overlooking impacts given the separation from the residential properties, which are approximately 30 metres at least. In relation to some of the comments from Polly, look, obviously the application, it relates to additional apartments, and that's what's before the council this evening, and those matters that she raised aren't necessarily for the council to consider tonight, but we are happy to provide details to contact a representative of the applicant directly to deal with some of the matters that she's raised.
Okay, thank you. Can I just get your name for the minutes?
Sorry, Patrick Brennan from Contour Consultants.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, councillors, are there any questions? No? Okay. Is there a proposal, a motion? Councillor Yildiz, you'd like to move the officer recommendation?
Yeah, no.
Councillor Kavanagh, seconded. Councillor Yildiz, would you like to speak? Councillor Kavanagh?
Just to say that I am pleased that we've managed to negotiate reducing the rooftop back to where it was in the initial discussions, and I think that the residents have a fair beef with that when they've negotiated that over a period of time and then find that at one stage the movement was to increase it. So I'm pleased it's back to where it was, and I do think that the additional development towards the Sydney Road end will have a minimal impact as such, and so therefore I'm supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Okay, then I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried. Lachlan, over to you for next steps.
Council has decided to issue a notice of decision to grant an amended planning permit. We'll send a copy of that notice to all objectors and permit applicant. Objectors will have 28 days should they wish to appeal that decision to VCAT. Likewise, the permit applicant would have 60 days should they wish to appeal any of the conditions.
Thank you, Lachlan. We'll now move on to the next item of business on the agenda, and that is DCF 89, 8 Hope Street, Brunswick. Can we get someone to call Councillor Davidson back in the room? Or she?
I think she's
She's still there? Okay. All right, councillors, we will proceed. Mark, can you please take us through this application?
Thank you, councillors.
So I'm presenting the application at 8 Hope Street in Brunswick. Quickly, in terms of the planning controls, the site's within a commercial 1 zone. You can see in the image above, it's sort of a mid-block property. It's also in a design and development overlay, Schedule 18, parking overlay, development contribution overlay, and also in an environmental audit overlay. This area in the planning scheme is nominated for significant housing growth, and the design and development overlay nominates this site for a preferred height of 17 metres. This is an amendment application. This is an amendment application to a substantially constructed development. You can see where the development sits on the images on the screen. It's in between 2 apartment buildings, one higher on one side and one lower to the other side, so it's like a transitional height. What we're talking about is an additional increase in height, so we're talking about an additional 65 centimetres to this building. That additional height is partly due to a thicker slab that's been constructed throughout the building, plus a higher parapet. There's no changes in terms of its ESD performance, accessibility, or any other benefits that were negotiated as part of the application. The other point to make is when the original application was approved, it was approved through the tribunal, and the tribunal made commentary that the height above our structure plan in this site was appropriate, given its context and given its rebuttal to buildings that are higher. There was public notice of the application because the proposal exceeded the height. There were 3 objections to the application. Following discussions with the applicant, those 3 objectors withdrew. So currently there's no objections associated with this application. The key considerations here are height, amenity and internal amenity, and on all those factors the assessment says it's acceptable, and it's recommended that an amended planning permit be issued for this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Is there an objector that would like to speak? Is there a representative from the applicant who would like to speak? Yes, please come forward.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Mark Schumann. I represent the applicant. I just want to endorse the recommendations of the officer's report. The amendments before you are generally due to necessity or improved building methodology, and none of those are really unreasonable in the circumstance. And I trust that you guys will make the reasonable decision in endorsing the recommendations of the planning officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions by councillors? No? Councillor Cameron.
Can I ask the applicant a question? Can you confirm with me that you've had no planning breaches in the past in Mormont? Of the applicant?
The applicant? No, I haven't. No.
Thanks. Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions? No? Councillor Kavanagh.
I'd like to move the officer recommendation and have a second.
Councillor Yildiz. Councillor Kavanagh.
Okay, and can I say I do so with a little bit of trepidation because I don't like retrospective permits, and particularly when they're in breach. But I do accept that the officers have told me that it is a very minor breach and due to an increase in slab height. I do think at that point the applicant should have come to us, but it didn't. And so therefore I've asked for officers to check, and I do believe that this is the only breach that this applicant has had in the time in Moreland. And as I say, on a scale, it is a minor breach, but it's not something that I would actively encourage in any circumstance. So because of the fact that it's a minor breach and it's a first time breach as such, therefore I'm prepared to move the officer recommendation to approve the amended plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Yildiz. No. Is there any debate around this item? No, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, all those opposed, I declare that carried. Mark, would you like to take us through the next steps?
Next steps, the council have resolved to issue a planning permit, so that permit will be issued and the applicant can continue with the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Well, there is no other business to be considered tonight, so I would declare the meeting closed. Thank you, councillors and members of the gallery and our viewers seeing this footage at home. Hey, council officers, I declare the meeting.